One of the most powerful tools in Illustrator is the Pathfinder panel and the relatively new Shape Builder tool. The job of both of these is to create new shapes from existing shapes. Used creatively, you can create things that you may never have thought possible. Let's take a look at how these tools work. I'm beginning this video with the pathfinder.ai file already open on my machine. And we're just going to start with some basic shapes to understand the concept of the Pathfinder. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a square in the upper left-hand corner. Now this is currently filled with this light green, which is the same color as the background. So let's just switch that to a different color. I'm going to choose maybe a nice red or orange color here. And then I'm going to use the ellipse tool to draw a circle somewhat over top of that. I'm going to change that color as well to something different. There we go. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is open up the Pathfinder panel. And being a panel, like all other panels, it'll be found under the Window menu. So if I go to the Window menu, come all the way down here to choose Pathfinder, you can see the shortcut is Shift-Command F9 or Shift-Control F9 on Windows. And this is going to open up the Pathfinder panel. Now, by default, the Pathfinder panel is grouped with the Align and Transform panels, but right now we're focusing strictly on the Pathfinder panel. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to select both of these objects because in order to use the Pathfinder, you have to have some objects selected. Now, the first section here is shape modes. Okay, so you'll notice the first shape mode you see here is Unite. And Unite is going to basically combine the two shapes. So if you click on that, it's going to make one new shape out of those two original shapes. So that's the job of Unite, and it can be quite powerful when used properly. I'm just going to undo so we can get back to where we were. The next mode is called minus front, and you can see that minus front is going to create a compound shape and subtract from the shape area. So it's basically, when I click this button, you'll notice that it subtracts the front object from the back object. Now I'm going to undo because this is really where stacking order becomes very important. Because if I select this green object and I go to Object Arrange Send Backwards, and I select both of these objects again, using the same minus front operation, it's going to create a totally different result. And that's where the stacking order becomes quite important. So I'm going to undo that. The stacking order is essentially how objects are arranged relative to one another. So when this object is in front, it's going to subtract itself from the backmost object. When I have them reversed, if I go to Object Arrange, Bring to Front, when I select these now, because this object is frontmost, it's going to subtract this object from the back object. Now the third option we have here is Intersect. Let's take a look at what that does. We click on that option, and you can see that it only leaves where the shapes intersect one another. And in this particular case, the arrangement or stacking order really isn't going to make much of a difference. If I bring that orange shape to the front and I perform that operation again, I essentially get the same result. However, it takes on the color of the frontmost object. So that's really the only difference with that particular shape mode. I'm going to undo that one more time. And then the last shape mode that we have is called Exclude. And what Exclude is going to do is it's going to punch a hole through the two objects where they both intersect. So I'm going to undo that as well. Now, when you select these objects, you'll notice that with any one of these modes, you can option click to create a compound shape and add to the shape area. So what I'm going to do, like for minus front, or actually let's use intersect, I'm going to hold down the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on Windows, and what that'll do is create a compound shape. You can see that both of these shapes still exist, but visually all you're seeing is that middle or intersecting object. When I click on it again, we can see where those two original shapes are still composed. Now, if you double click on this, this will take you into what's called isolation mode. And this actually allows you to modify these. So if I move this original rectangle or the original circle, I'm actually modifying that shape, and it's really creating an effect that's essentially live. It's a great way to work and avoid having to manipulate things or duplicate things over and over again. To exit this isolation mode, I just click on this left arrow a couple times, and now we're back to where we were. So I'm just going to undo a couple times to get back to my original shape. Then down here at the bottom, we have some pathfinders. So for example, this first pathfinder is divide. If I click on that, it's going to divide this shape into 3 separate objects. To really see this, I'm going to go to the object menu and choose ungroup. And when I click off of this, you'll notice that now I have different elements that I can use to create different designs. They're all divided into separate objects. I'm going to go ahead and undo that, get back to where I was, and we'll select these 2 objects again. The second pathfinder is called trim. What trim is going to do, if I click off of this and ungroup this, you'll notice that even though they look the same, it has trimmed the front object from the back object. Again, very useful when you need this. Let's undo that a couple times, get back to where we were. Select both of them. The third option here is merge. Again, very similar to what we had done earlier. I'm going to ungroup this, and we can see here that merge is doing something very similar to what the trim did, but with merge, you'll notice that you can take multiple shapes and perform that operation. So let's undo that a couple more times. There we go. We'll select those 2 objects. Next, we have crop. Choose that option. That's going to perform a similar operation as to what we had done up here in our shape mode, and that is just going to crop the area where they intersect. Go ahead and undo that. Then down here we have outline. Click on that, and that's going to generate outlines of the overall shapes. To see this, you can always apply a stroke to this object. I'm just going to apply a stroke, maybe increase the stroke weight a little bit, just so you can see the effect that is performed by choosing outline. I'm going to go ahead and undo that, back to my original shapes. Last but not least, we have the minus back, and if we click on that, what it's going to do is it's going to subtract the backmost object from the frontmost object. Now I'm going to delete these because I want to show you a practical example here. Because what I have here on my artboard is some text that I've converted to outlines. If you click on these, you'll notice that these are converted to outlines and are no longer a font. They're just shapes. Now the thing that's cool about this is that we can use the Pathfinder and the Shape Builder to perform different operations. So what I'm going to do here, when I convert text to an outline, it really creates what's called a compound path. So I'm going to go to the object menu, come down to compound path, and I'm going to choose release. And that is going to release this into primitive shapes. And then I'm also going to go to the object menu and choose ungroup, and now these are just down to their basic shapes. So where this is going to become useful, we can see we've got a couple instances here, like the E has lost its punch out. So I'm going to select both of those shapes, the punch out as well as the overall shape. And if we come up here to our Pathfinder, you're going to notice that we have a couple of choices that are going to be helpful. So this first one, which is minus front, if we click on that, you'll notice that it's going to punch the hole through the E and get us back to where we wanted to be. Now, let's go ahead and go to the G. I'm going to select all of the shapes of the G. Now, we can do the same thing in the Pathfinder, but what we do have is something called the Shape Builder tool. And the Shape Builder tool is located right here. And I like to think of the Shape Builder tool as Pathfinder built into a tool. Because what we could do here, using the Pathfinder, you'll notice that when I hover over these selected objects, they kind of get highlighted, indicating that it's going to do something. So as a quick example, if I click and drag across 2 objects like this, it'll merge them together, which is very, very cool. I'm going to undo that because it's not what I want to do in this case. And conversely, if I hold down the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on Windows, I can punch a hole through these objects to get the G back to where it was. So I'm going to come over here. Let's select the 2 parts of the D with my selection tool. Once again, I'll go to the Shape Builder tool, hold down Option, and that'll punch the hole right through that object. This is really, really nice. Now, what about these 2 shapes? I'm going to select both of these. And we can see here that there's areas where they're both overlapping. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to modify this to make it look like this ampersand is kind of weaving in and out of the letter D. So I could do this again with the Pathfinder or the Shape Builder tool. In this example, I'm going to use my Shape Builder tool. And I'm going to zoom into this area. I'm just going to hold down Command Spacebar on Mac or Control Spacebar on Windows, and I'm going to zoom in on this area so we can see the primitive shapes. And you can see that with the Shape Builder selected, as I hover over these areas, they become highlighted. Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click and drag across all three of these elements. And what's going to happen is it's going to merge all of those together. Now, it took on the shape of that center element, which is fine. I'm just going to press Command 0 on Mac or Control 0 on Windows. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to my selection tool, just select the ampersand, and change that back to that dark green color. And when I click off of this, you can see that we now have a very cool appearance that makes it look like this ampersand is weaving in and out of the letter D. It's really not, because this is simply a two-dimensional design. But by dividing it and breaking it apart, you can use either the Pathfinder or the Shape Builder tools to create the illusion that we see right here. And we might want to add some finishing touches here. Maybe I'll select the dot above the eye and we'll make that a dark green as well. And as you can see, these tools rely heavily on the stacking order of objects in your document. Understanding stacking order and how these Pathfinder operations perform will get you well on your way to creating amazing artwork in Illustrator CS6.